Hello and welcome to this recording of a webinar with Yasmin Ali, all about the top 5 AML mistakes that accountants make and the one thing that you can do today in order to solve one of them. Say hello, Yasmin.
Hi, Simon.
Hello, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go. The webinar has ultimately came about because Yasmin helped me at GreenStones bring our systems up to the required standard off the back of a visit we had about 12 months ago as now. I think it was October last year. And we worked together extensively and ticked all the boxes and all the rest of it and enlightened me. So I thought it'd be brilliant. I know lots of people have challenges around money laundering. It'd be brilliant to have Yasmin along to talk to the community about the mistakes that she finds most practices make and answer your questions. So I already have lots of questions in the bank that we'll be answering as we go through. But as always, we love stupid questions. So if you've got a stupid question or a silly question, please pop it in the Q&A box. Rather than the chat box, the Q&A box is the one next to the raised hand one with a question mark on it. And when I say stupid or silly, I mean the questions that you are potentially too embarrassed to ask or don't want to ask, because I bet there are other people in the room got those same silly questions or same stupid questions. And they're generally speaking, they're easier to answer. We'll take the hard ones as well, Yasmin, won't we? We'll take any questions you've got.
Yeah.
And there is a bit of a disclaimer with this one as well, in that obviously the answers that we are giving today are their general answers. They're not specific to your personal circumstances. We've not got letters of engagement in place and all that sort of stuff. So there'll be an opportunity to talk to Yasmin outside of this meeting, and Mark will pop the URL to book a meeting with Yasmin. So there'll be an opportunity for you to ask specific questions about your specific circumstances with Yasmin towards the end of the conversation today. But anyway, that's enough waffling from me. I've managed to fill 2 minutes already, Yasmin. So it's like I told you we won't have enough time. But anyway, without further ado, I will bugger off and let Yasmin share her top 5 mistakes. Ready? Yay!
Thanks very much, Simon. It's
You're
good to be
welcome.
here. Let's get going. Hopefully everybody can see that. Hopefully everybody can see that. So we'll get
Yep,
started
we
with
can
the
see that.
top
Yep.
5 AML mistakes that I have found. The first one is not knowing what to include in your firm-wide risk assessment. So there are quite a few elements of your firm-wide risk assessment that you need to include. We'll go through those. Not necessarily, I'll list them and then just talk a little bit about a little bit of each one. So the first one is your client risk. And that involves describing your client base for your firm. So it should not be generic. It needs to be quite detailed. And this is one of the things that I pick up on in my work with clients, is that they're not describing their clients well enough and in detailed enough. This is a document that has to be used by yourself and, most importantly, your staff. So they need to understand who you're serving. And again, that's why it needs to be detailed. Then you've got your geographical risk. So where do your clients operate from? Are they primarily in the UK, or are they dealing with other countries outside the UK? And if so, are they in any of the high-risk jurisdictions? That needs to be stated very clearly under this risk. You've got your products and services risk. So these are the products and services that your firm provides to clients. Now, every accountant firm is different, and you need to be able to list the actual services that you provide, not just oh, you could provide this service or you could provide that service, but what you actually provide. Your transactions risk. So that's dealing with your client accounts, if you have client accounts, and how that operates within your firm. Your delivery channels risk, which involves how you meet your clients. So nowadays, everybody's meeting everybody online, and that's absolutely acceptable, but it should be in sort of face-to-face in terms of Zoom online. You're actually seeing your client's face. And that also needs to be stated. There are obviously client accountants that meet their clients in person, so that needs to be stated as well. And then finally, the newest one is your proliferation of financing risk, which most accountants will not deal with. And this is not about defining it on your firm-wide risk assessment. This is about you stating that you either deal with clients in this industry or you don't. Make it very clear. The biggest thing that when you're working on your firm-wide risk assessment is you're assessing your risk for each area. And then you have to address how you reduce that risk. So what are your process and procedures under each risk? And that needs to be very clear. So for instance, the proliferation of financing risk. If you're a firm that would never deal with a client that's involved in this risk or in this industry, then your mitigation risk, your mitigation action is we will never engage with such a client. It's very simple. You have to remember that firm-wide risk assessment, it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to state exactly what you do in your firm. And the more detail that you have, the clearer it is not only to yourself, as I mentioned before, your staff, but should you potentially be inspected. Your second one.
So Yasmin, can I just
Yes.
think, because I'm happy to share what we experienced or what I experienced within GreenStones.
Yes.
So there's a question from Andrew about a copy of the presentation slides. Are you happy to share the slides? There's only 9 of them, Andrew.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can make sure you get those. And then just on the firm-wide risk assessment, I think it's fair to say that the GreenStones one wasn't probably as comprehensive as it could have been. And I was quite surprised at how much work I needed to do in order to, I mean, I thought I'd done it all right, but how much work I needed to do in order to make sure that it was good enough. Can you give us a feel, Yasmin, for how long it should be? So the original one, the original Greenstones one, I think if I remember right, it was about 3 pages. But how long do you think the risk assessment should be for a normal sort of 6 people practice?
It isn't about the length
Okay.
of the document. It's about the quality of the information in the document. So you have to think of it, that is your starting point of your AML system. So that forms everything else. If your firm-wide risk assessment is not accurate and tells people what you're doing, you can't really follow through with the other documents that I'm going to be discussing. It is like your foundation of your AML system. So the more that you put into it, the more that you understand what the risks are. And you'll hear me talk about risk throughout the presentation because that is your starting point of your risk. All of your clients that come in could be a potential risk to your firm in terms of money laundering.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to express that and state that clearly. What systems do you have? And as you're going through it, you'll probably realize, actually, I don't have all the systems in place, so then I need to put them in. Does that help?
It does, yeah. So how much time do you think a practitioner should invest in doing if it's that sort of fundamental?
Yeah.
And just as a ballpark, I'm not, and I don't think anybody's going to go. Yasmin said 3 hours, and I spent
Yeah.
3 hours and 10 minutes, and therefore I'm compliant. But is it? Do you think it's a half a day's job? Do you think it's a week's job? To set it up, and then I know there's a maintenance job that needs to go along with it as well,
Yeah,
isn't there? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. The setting up is the hardest part because you're reviewing it every year. I mean, I would say allocate yourself a good 3 or 4 hours because you need to think about what you're doing, think about what you're writing and realizing that, oh yes, I have all these things and I just haven't actually documented it. I do this every day or I do this every week, but I haven't documented. So, I would say maybe half a day
Yeah, and
maximum.
I would concur from my experience. I could concur
Yeah.
with that, and then I know you had my version, and then came
Yes.
back with lots of yellow bits saying don't understand or can you expect. So it's probably in total it probably took me best part of a day to get mine into a position
Mm.
where it should say brilliant, excellent, thank you. I've got another question from Andrew just to say it is being recorded, Kim, and you'll get the recording. Everybody that's registered will get the recording. So Andrew said, can you define what proliferation, this is my Norfolk, proliferation of financial risk means in layman's terms? Is it primarily dealing with a particular type of client or what clients are doing around financing their business?
It's primarily dealing with clients who are um fine. involved with the financing of biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, technology, any sort of that sort of industry. So if you have clients in that industry, but they're financing that industry, then it's a risk.
Okay. And that could be downstream of that, could they? Because it's unlikely, obviously, that lots of accountants in my community or our
Yeah,
community will have
it's a
that.
very, very low risk for
Yeah.
accountants, to be honest. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I
Excellent.
hope
So
that
I
helps.
can
Yeah.
put that to the bottom of my list of things to worry about then. Brilliant. Thank you. I
Yeah.
will that's answered that and that. I will let you carry on.
Okay. So you had a preview here. The second one is having an incomplete AML policy. Does it actually reflect what your firm does? And these are the areas that your policy should include. So you've got your generic policy statement, which should include the referencing to the money laundering regulations and the amendments. The identification of your MLRO and possibly a deputy if you have one, but also the responsibilities of the MLRO. The risk assessment and management, your statement from your firm stating that this is very important to your firm and this is how you manage risk overall. A description that you actually have your firm-wide risk assessment in place and where it's located. This is to ensure that staff members can actually access the firm-wide risk assessment at any point, should they need to. So this is where you put in your definition of proliferation of financing risk, and there's a standard template for this that's included in this policy. Then you've got client risk assessment. This is where you actually describe what is your process for risk assessing clients, and not only new clients, but existing clients. So what do you do every year? So I've given it away. You should be doing it every year. You should be risk assessing your client every year. That doesn't mean filling out the same form every year. It could be a review form. It could just be a review box at the end of the original risk assessment form, but a review process needs to be taking place. Your CDD process, again, each firm will have its own methodologies and procedures, and this is where you describe it. It can be very detailed. I've seen some very detailed procedures, and I leave those because that is the firm's, that's how they do it, and it helps the staff members know what is the correct way that firm does it. So things like filling out an onboarding form, filling out a KYC form, obviously identification documents, and what software you actually use. Anything that involves assessing assessing your clients that come into your firm, you put into that section. Your ongoing monitoring, this is one of the things that inspectors look for, whether, let's say you have a client 2023, so you've done all the client due diligence, you've done the risk assessments, but you've never done any ongoing monitoring of that client. So you actually don't know what's happening with that client. You haven't updated any of the forms. You might be doing it practically, but you're not updating any of the forms. So there's no evidence to show that you're actually monitoring this client on an ongoing basis in terms of risk or KYC or identification. Then the next section is your SAR, so your suspicious activity reporting procedures, and again, detailing them, detailing how a staff member will report internally to yourselves as an MLRO, and then as the MLRO, what the procedure is for them to report externally. That's all listed in that section. Record keeping is about what kind of records do you keep for your client. So again, it could be identity verification records, transaction records, onboarding records, and also you need to state what is the retention period that you keep records in that for your firm. Training is another section that you need to list the type of training that your employees undertake, how often, what are the topics that are covered under the AML training. You can include your MLRO training as well in there if you wish. And then finally, your internal control procedures. So does the MLRO complete an annual AML review of the entire system? or do you bring in a third party that kind of looks and audits your systems? And finally, at the end of the AML policy, you should have a review box so that every year you're not rewriting the policy, you're just reviewing the policy, looking at it and seeing whether have you made any changes? Is it reflective of your current practices at the moment? And if it isn't, then you make the changes on the policy, you indicate it on the review box, and you're finished reviewing that for the year.
So Yasmin, just before you move on to the next one, if you was just about to flick that box, I've got three things that came up for me. One of which might be a stupid question, but I've got three things that came up, and then
Okay.
the fundamental one, the one that gets asked the most often, I suppose,
Yes,
for us. So let me fire these at you. During
sure.
the course of that, you said that the policy needs to tell the team where the firm-wide risk assessment is,
Yeah,
in case the team member needs to look at the firm-wide risk assessment.
yes.
This is probably a shortfall in my training for the team. What sort of things would they need to look at the firm-wide risk assessment for? Why would a
So if
team
they
member go and look at that?
if a team member is responsible for onboarding a new client or meeting a new client, then and the new client is, let's say, an electrician, but your firm only deals with plumbers. They look at the firm-wide risk assessment, and the client base of the accountant's firm is plumbers. So why would you take on an electrician? There needs to be a reason about why you would consider taking on an electrician, because your expertise is in the plumbing industry, not the electrician industry, if you see what I mean. So they would look at that and say, oh, actually, it doesn't fit in with our client base. What can I do about this? Should I go to speak to my boss and say, can we take on this person? Maybe this is an opportunity for our firm to expand into a different industry, and therefore the MLRO would need to update their firm-wide risk assessment.
Oh, I've got you. Okay, so it could be, and I'm thinking out loud now. It could be that we were approached by a firm of solicitors,
Hmm.
and we don't have an understanding of how solicitors' accounts work, and therefore the money laundering risks involved in working for a firm of solicitors.
Yes,
And that would be included or excluded in the firm-wide risk assessment, and therefore there's a conversation as to whether we should be taking that solicitor on or not. And if we do
hmm.
take it on, updating that risk assessment to say that it's more risky because we don't have the knowledge of doing it. Is that a
Exactly.
yeah, brilliant, excellent. Thank you very much. Again, that's something that I've learned today that I didn't know. And another question that gets talked about when we're at conferences, Yasmin, where we
Hmm.
don't never say it publicly, is should we have a SAR target? So it's like I know I talk to some accountants that have never submitted a SAR ever in their life, and it's
Hmm.
like, is there an expected number, or should we be doing one a year to demonstrate that we could do it? Is there a do you have a feel with the firms that you work with
Yeah,
how often somebody should be
it's a very
reporting?
good question, because even sometimes the supervisory bodies have an expectation that there should be some sort of SARs every year. Um, I would have to say my viewpoint is, and my experience is that if you are doing everything and monitoring your clients on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, you know what your clients are doing, you're evidencing that, then if nothing's happening, why would you submit a SAR for the sake of something because you think that needs to be submitted? It's not about targets. It's about recognizing, is there suspicious activity? So if any of your member of staff think, okay, this looks suspicious, they make that report to the MLRO, and then the MLRO decides whether to take it further. They can say, oh no, actually it isn't. That's the reason why you need to have specific procedures in place so that everybody knows what constitutes even filling out an internal SAR form, you know. So it isn't about targets, it's about knowing your clients, again, knowing your clients. And you can probably go 10, 20 years without a SAR, because you're evidencing your client's business to transactions. They just do the same thing every year, and you're
Yeah,
doing the same thing every year.
yeah. So it's possible not to submit but in my, I mean, again, I'll share in my experience. There's always something that somebody's doing that they probably shouldn't be. So, say for example they claim VAT back on entertaining expenses or whatever, and you tell them
Yeah,
about it, and then they don't redisclose it the following year. My
yeah,
understanding is that's a is SAR. So and again, you sort of provoked me a little bit there. I hadn't thought that there should be more internal SARs coming. Effectively, there should be more internal SARs coming to the
yeah,
MLRO than are actually
yeah,
going to the NCA, because
yeah,
they should be taking. If you don't know about it, you can't make a decision about whether you should actually submit a SAR
yeah.
or
And that
not.
comes back to the training again, right, of the
Yeah,
staff knowing when to submit an internal SAR. Yeah.
brilliant. And then the ongoing monitoring. And this is the question. It comes up a lot, and it's come up. There's a couple of people, Ashley and Sean, has asked, how often do you have to verify somebody's identity? So
Mm,
when you take somebody on at the start, I mean, we've got
mm,
long-standing clients that have been a client for 20 years. They've lived in the
yeah,
same place. We go and see them, or they appear on Zoom or whatever. How
yeah.
often do you think we should be checking their identity documents and whatnot?
So the short answer is that you need to put it in your AML policy.
Okay.
How often do you want to put it in? How often do you want to verify? Um, if somebody's identification and proof of address expires, then you would ask them for the current one. You always should have the current proof of address and proof of identity on file. Verification, um, there's a cost, right? If you're verifying all your clients every year, it just doesn't actually make any sense to do
Yeah.
that. Hope you, so I would say maybe 3 years if you wanted to do it 3 years, if you wanted to do it 5 years, or you could have something in your policy to say long-standing client, existing clients for 20 years, we'd like to do it every 5 years, but we do this and this and this in the meantime. We gather their current proof of address and current proof of ID. Or you can do something like clients who have been with us 5 years, we'll do it every 3 years. So
Okay.
it's there's a lot of it's a very gray area, but you can make it as concrete as you wish.
Yeah. So my take on that is that there's no definitive answer as to what
No,
you should do.
no,
It's only from a practitioner perspective, it's the level
yeah.
of risk that you're prepared to
You always have
take.
to think about the risk. So even if you have a client for 20 years and then like last year you've heard something, you've seen something about that client and you think, oh, something's not right here, then you've got to, then you can do your AML check if you think that something's happened or you've got information elsewhere about a client. It doesn't really, so you're looking, it's a combination of knowing your client and risk assessing your client.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then Stacey said, what if your governing body requires you every year or more often if high risk?
If they're high risk,
Then you have to
yes.
do it every year, do you?
Yeah, if your governing body requires you to do that, then that's
You've got
what
to
you
get on
have to
and
do.
get and
Yes.
doing it. There's no
Yeah,
there's
if
no
they're high
opt out.
risk, yeah.
There's no
You
opt
wouldn't
out
do
on that.
that. I imagine they wouldn't be asking you to do that for a medium risk or normal risk client because that
No.
would be the majority of your clients.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. I will let you continue.
Okay. Right. The third one is kind of what's happening is insufficient evidence or documentation is part of your CDD. So what happens is that the the sort of how do I phrase this? Sometimes people think that just gathering the ID and verifying them is CDD and that's enough. It actually isn't enough. That's only one part of your client due diligence process. So when you meet your new client, the first thing you're going to do is have some sort of notes. You either have an onboarding form or they fill out a form. And you've got a set sort of questions and they fill it out and you look at it. There's directors on there, there's PSCs on there, there's PEPs on there, whatever it is. So you've got an idea of who that client is. Then you go and do your checks, your company checks, your AML checks, etc. But you've also got something about if you've got, for instance, this is an example of a know your client checklist. So you've got some questions that you'll ask and you'll go through and find out, okay, have you got all the information on the client? Have you verified the client? Do you know their directors? Have you gathered their information? And it is about really honing in on the fact that you are gathering a lot of information about your clients, apart from just identification and proof of address. What type of business do they run? where their source of funds, how long have they been in business. And I know all of you probably do that. It's just about making sure that you have evidence for it, because you might have it on little pieces of paper and you haven't scanned it in and it's not on their records. And that's what inspectors are looking for, saying, well, where's your documentation from when you met them to now? And have you been reviewing it every year to see if it's accurate? Then the other element that some firms sort of not pay attention to is the AML training for staff, and the evidence is actually lacking. So you might be training your staff, and that's fine, but do you have the evidence? Do they have a training record? Do they have a certificate? Do you have something that says that they understand the policies and procedures of your firm, that they understood the training? What does the training cover? All of that is very important, and it shows that you are adhering to the regulations in terms of the staff being able to understand what AML means, and in their day-to-day work when they're dealing with client accounts, they should have that AML sort of switched on, so that when they are looking at transactions, they're thinking, okay, that's normal, or this is not normal, or this is unusual. Then they can make decisions for themselves. So it's really important to have the evidence that they understand the role in their role, how they meet the money laundering regulations.
Thank you, Yasmin. Just a quick question on that. How often?
It should be done annually.
At least annually.
Annually, yeah.
I think I know the answer to this, but it's not enough to say, here's the training, or you need to log on to this website and here's your money laundering training. You need to make sure that they've done it and record that they've done it and keep a central log of what they're doing, rather than them keeping their own logs, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and also if the log can say something about what have you learned, so that they're not just going through an online session. They have to be thinking and say, write down what have they actually learned with that session. That's really important.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And then finally is the inadequate explanation of risk, identifying and mitigating. So this comes down to not only your firm-wide risk assessment, where you identify the different risks that you have in your firm or to your firm and how you mitigate them, but also it applies to your client risk assessment. And sometimes it's easy to identify the risk of a client when you've got your client risk assessment form, and there's lots of questions that you need to answer in a client risk assessment form. But also, how do you mitigate the risk? So there are a lot of templates out on the market where you've got questions and you just say yes, 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 yes. It's actually not enough to say yes, yes, yes. You have to say, why do you think this is okay? Or if it's no, how do you mitigate that risk? If you're offering, for instance, a service of payroll to a client, how do you mitigate the risk of payroll? If a client is offering that's sort of a one simple example, but it's always important to ensure that you explain how you reduce a risk for a client. We've talked about the firm-wide risk assessment, but definitely in the client risk assessment, there's not enough information that's coming through about how that risk is reduced.
Yeah, and that just to jump, so that was my big one. So it's like the yes, yes, no, no, yes, not applicable, yes, no, no is a classic, Simon, and that was the top of the list of things. So why did you say yes to that or no? It's like, it's obvious because it's here, it's in my head. But yeah, that was the
idea is that you're tailoring the risk assessment to the client, so that you understand the client, and it just becomes second nature as you do these things. So of course there'll be some things where you just say yes and you don't need to explain, but then there's other questions where you need to actually just expand a little bit on it so it looks more tailored. Because although we don't want to sort of fill out these forms on the basis of everyone getting inspected and wanting to meet that, there is that element of that's the reality. That's what they would look for. Inspectors don't want to see a yes, yes, that they want to see that it's being tailored, that you've thought through the risk, and they will pick up on that if it's just ticks.
And am I right in saying, Yasmin, that once you've done that the first year, so if you've done all the
Yes,
explanations and whatnot the first year, the
yes, yeah,
following year, it's a question of reviewing. So you can take the same
exactly.
document, update it, and it's just a question of reviewing it to make sure that it's still accurate. So after the
Yeah.
first year, if nothing changes, it's just a, a
You just
review
put nothing,
process.
nothing's changed, and then you sign it and you reviewed it. Yeah, that's
Brilliant.
exactly right. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
So those are your 5 risks, common AML mistakes. And what's the solution? So it's time to not bury your head in the sand and review your AML system regularly. All of those elements that I've discussed. Once you review your whole AML system, you'll pick out any gaps and you can action them quickly. And I would highly recommend you do this before you get the inspection notice, because it's a lot of stress when you get that notice, and it doesn't need to be stressful. So thank you very much. I hope you found that very useful. And if you've
Yeah,
got any questions, just let me know.
it's brilliant. So, I was quite, and I shared this in the copy that came out. So, if you just want to stop sharing your screen, Yasmin, if
I
Mark,
will.
if you could put the URL in the chat box for me, I thought I was all right, and I was quite blasé going into my inspection, and came out with it. I wouldn't say with a slap wrist by any stretch of the imagination, but there was room for improvement. We'll put it like that.
Mm.
And as a consequence of that, I then went to Yasmin, and I wholeheartedly recommend Yasmin for the work that she'd done. Mark's just put a link in the chat box. So if you want 15 minutes with Yasmin to talk about your specific situation and where you are and more advice specific to you, then Yasmin it will gladly have that conversation with you. Just click that link, pick your time, and away you go. I've got no other questions in the Q&A box at the moment, but I have got some questions that we've got preloaded that I just want to go through, if I may, Yasmin, with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a couple of people, and again, I think, well, we did say before we started, this is the fundamental thing that people ask. So I've got Kim and Steph and Polly all ask similar questions around what is the minimum we have to do to be compliant in terms of frequency of checks and actual documentation that we have. So when do we know that we've done enough, or what is enough?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, but I'll put it this way. If you've got your firm-wide risk assessment, your AML policy, all of your CDD documents, including your identification, verification of your clients, your KYC, your client risk assessment, you've got your training for your staff, and you've got evidence all of that, then you have a good, robust system. And what you're doing every year is just refreshing that. Every year, you're just reviewing it. The hardest part is getting that started. So setting up a system, or consolidating what you have, or just improving what you have, so that the next year you just go, okay, it's time to review my firm-wide risk assessment. Has anything changed? Nothing's changed. Review it next document, review the AML policy, review, you might want to have somebody when you're doing, for instance, the end of year client accounts. That's the time when you review all of their KYC, you review their risk assessment. That's a good time to do it, because everybody might have a different time of year if you're, obviously doing limited companies, etc. That's a good time to do it, because then it gets done, instead of trying to do 100 clients in 1 month, which is, it's ridiculous, really. You wouldn't want to do that. And once you've got all of that, then I don't see why that shouldn't be just continue that every year. And that's what I would consider enough. But if you're not doing that, then you need to be doing more.
Brilliant. So it's a question of getting it in place, and then
Yes,
uh, it's the same with any
absolutely.
system or practice that we've got. I mean, you could be very
Yeah,
anal about your tax knowledge, for example, and go down
yeah,
that tax thing, or your audit knowledge, or your FRS 102 knowledge, or whatever it is.
yeah,
But we all have to judge how much knowledge we need and what level of risk.
yeah.
And money laundering or MLA is not is for it's exactly the same process, or the
It is.
same
Yeah,
thought process. There's a commercial risk in running a practice,
yeah.
and you have to decide how much risk you want to take. Is that a
Yeah,
reasonable
that's
way of
fair.
putting
That's
it?
fair. Exactly. And it's about yeah, thinking about your risk. And once you have that process in place, it shouldn't be onerous. Like, I really find that it's really important that accountants understand it shouldn't be onerous. once you have a system in place. It's just like when you're doing tax returns for your clients, it shouldn't be onerous. If
Mhm.
they give you all the information, then you just carry on and you do whatever you need to do. The hardest part is getting that information, so it's a bit similar. So yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Ellie asked, "Can you give us some everyday or some examples of everyday things to look out with smaller clients?" So she said AML often feels so far removed from her client base, but
Okay.
when what sort of things are people SARing and stuff like that? What should they be looking out
Yeah, I
for?
mean, you don't have to think about doing a SAR. It's just about thinking about if there's any change in the ownership structure, so additional directors or anything like that. If there's change in transactions over a period of time, so your client normally has their income as I don't know, 5 grand for normal, and then for 3 months in a row, their income has increased double. So you'd kind of think, okay, what's happening there? That's a practical thing. Um, if there is there a change in what the client is actually offering in terms of their service? Have they moved into a different industry that you may not be familiar, or just a different service and they're adding on? Why are they doing that? What's the purpose of doing that? Um, on the negative side, have they suddenly become uncooperative or evasive in providing you information? You need to have a conversation with the client on what's happening, and then you make a decision of whether, if it's a prolonged evasiveness, you make commercial decision on, do you continue with this client? Is there a problem? Do you do the SAR? Um, have there been any unexplained cash injections into the business? And that's really important as well, because you need to know, well, if you suddenly see something come into the bank and say, well, where did this money come from? It's not like you're not going to ask. You're going to ask where the money came from. I
Yeah,
hope that
another
helps. Yeah.
definitely another one that somebody shared with me a little while ago. And again, unless you're thinking about it and you sort of have your what I'd say your spidey senses
Yes,
sort of
yeah,
on alert, it's like
yeah.
if somebody's approaching the VAT registration limit
Hmm.
and you have a conversation with them, and it's like they'll say, "Well, I'm not doing the work because I want to keep below the VAT registration limit," but
Yeah.
your suspicion should be aroused because potentially they're still doing the work, they're just not putting it through
Mm.
the system. So the risk, their risk level is higher because of
Yeah.
the level of turnover that they got,
Yes.
and there's all sorts of things like that where you just need to be, I suppose, aware
It's just being aware, isn't it?
yeah,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
thinking about it. Brilliant. We've got a
Mm.
couple of questions. Matthew and somebody's anonymous has put one in, but let me just ask this before we go over to those. How much of an impact do you think there will be when the AML supervision for accountants is moved over to the FCA? There's several people asked that.
Yeah.
Have you got any idea?
It's
Are
it's a
you
very
should
it's a very difficult one, because at the moment I believe there isn't a timeline for the moving over to the FCA. Um, there's also questions about the experience of FCA staff currently in the accountancy industry. Do they have the knowledge? How are they going to recruit those people? Um, and from what I've seen with some of the supervisory bodies, they are kind of pushing back a little bit and asking questions and maybe going back to see whether, making their voices a bit stronger, because that's not what they actually recommended in the consultation. Um, so I guess we'll have to see. I think the worst case scenario is that AML becomes very onerous.
Yeah, we end up like being regulated like the FCA do with regard, or the
Yeah,
FCA does with
yeah,
regards to
yeah.
how they're doing it. But yeah, it'd be an
It will be. It will
interesting
be.
journey that will when it gets there. So let me just ask these couple of questions, and again, I'll just reiterate: it's general advice rather than specific advice. If you want specific, then hit that link that Mark's popped in the chat box in order to book the conversation with Yasmin, and then she can go through the whole thing. But who should who should you do ID checks on for charities? Is it all of the trustees, or can you just get away with the chairman and the FD, or is there
So again, you
ever more?
put it in your AML policy of what you would like to do. Um, I so would probably recommend that you gather the ID and the proof of address for all of the trustees, but the AML check would be done on the key people in the charity. So maybe the senior person the management person, CEO, for instance, who you deal with on a regular basis, the chair and the treasurer, you could do your AML checks on,
So
but make it clear in your policy.
again, this is playing with it. So there's no right or wrong answer to that, Yasmin, is there? It's not.
No,
It's not
no,
like it's Section 23 of the Taxes Act that says this.
no,
Again,
no.
it's your risk, and as long as you've
Yeah,
documented why you've chosen to do what you've chosen to
yeah,
do, as
yeah,
long as it's not negligent and I can't be asked to do it because I can't be asked to do it type stuff. As
yeah.
long as you've documented why and that reason is justifiable, then you can do what you think is reasonable. Is the long and the short of it?
Yeah, it's based on risk. So another element of that is that you would probably have like a trustee complete a form. So are they a PEP? Because you don't
Yeah,
know, right?
yeah,
Or do they have any other interests with other organizations or charities? Are there any related parties? So you can ask them that, I'd recommend doing that. Because then people don't necessarily volunteer that unless you ask. So on
no,
your onboarding form for any organization, you would put that down. Do you have any PEPs? And you explain that and you give them the information, you give them the guidance because not everybody understands the acronym. So
yeah.
it's about explaining that. And then you've got the information from the client direct from them. You're not making an assumption.
Excellent, thank you. And I think you're going to answer the same with this one, but it's like
Yeah.
also I have a Canadian client that's very large. They have dozens of directors, but we only deal with a small handful of people for the purpose of processing the UK payroll. Who do we ID in that instance? And again, I'm
I
gonna. It's
think
got
that, yeah, I think that's a bit more specific.
okay, yeah.
Yes.
So
Let
that's
me,
a conversation, Matthew. We want to have a conversation with Yasmin, but it's like it's got to in my world, it's got to be make sure that they're all right, but then make sure that the people that you're actually dealing with, you know who it is that you're dealing with. So again, it goes back to that
yeah,
risk, I suppose.
yeah.
Um, the next question: we have an online system where we have a tick box checklist for risk assessments. But are there any templates you can recommend for keeping the more detailed info separately? So systems wise, do you work with anybody? Is there any systems that you recommend a lot, Yasmin, that you're prepared to share? Or
Um, I work with Zama myself. Now, an online system checklist is fine, but in your online system checklist, is there not a box that says comments or something that you can add? Because to have another document to me seems, you've got to move from one system to another document to implement, add the comments and then marry the two together, which is just extra steps, if
yeah,
that makes sense. So look at your online system. I don't know what one you're using, but a lot of them do have like an opportunity of when you just say yes or no, a little box to you can put
to
in some
record the
more
notes.
comments and more information just to make it tailored.
Excellent, thank you. And Rachel said, I sometimes provide QuickBooks training. Do I need to AML those clients? So if I'm just providing training on accountancy software, is that caught within AML? I'm going to say yes. I don't know. I don't know. All of a sudden, I feel like I'm an expert, Yasmin.
Well, the first question is, have you issued an engagement letter to this client? Potentially, the client could become your client, even though you're just doing QuickBooks training, because that's sort of how clients start off. They want to sort of test the waters. Oh, I can do this, and then they realize they can't do it all themselves. So if you've got an engagement letter to do that, then yes, you need to AML check.
Yeah, and then the sub question of that. I also just sell the software licenses, so I just sell Zero or QuickBooks to the client and don't do any of the work. What do
Oh.
you think that's
So there's
ideal?
no, is that just an add-on service? Is that
Yeah, it'd
just
just be a retail job.
a
Yeah,
retail, the accountant is selling the software license and has
yeah,
nothing else to do with the client?
yeah.
So it's just a product that they're
Just a product
selling.
sale, basically. Yeah,
Okay. If that's part of your firm-wide risk assessment, that's one of your services,
yeah.
then that's on there. Is it listed? How do you mitigate the risk when you sell a software license? Is there any risk to that? Do you feel comfortable with not providing, like, do you have any documents that you gather for that client?
I would guess the way
There's
the
a lot of
way
questions that I'd be
yeah
asking
you'd be
for
asking. Yeah,
that.
that's probably a
That,
fifteen
yes,
minute conversation or a thing. But
possibly.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a you
possibly.
yeah I might be buying it for 20 quid a month, and I can sell it to them for 23 quid a month, and they can buy it on the internet for 25 quid a month. But it sounds like a lot of aggravation to me. I'd probably just say thanks, but no, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Um, then Kim said, "Where's the best place to go for guidance? Our governing body or other organisation we use AMLCC and firm wide risk assessments, but then our governing body makes us fill in separate forms for practice insert. It feels onerous at times." Can I answer that?
Yes.
So, Kim, the best place to go for guidance is Yasmin. Is there? So, I know she's not going to say that, but in my humble opinion, no doubt there's other people out there and all the rest of it. But Yasmin was brilliant for us, and
Thanks, Sam.
yeah, I wouldn't. I'd wholeheartedly recommend. Brilliant, as Kim's put that. Wholeheartedly recommend that. Pranav, uh, how can we ensure the software or systems our firm uses for AML checks fully meets all regulatory requirements?
You have to ask what sort. It depends on the software that you're using.
Yeah,
So again, you're going back to your policy, right? You're going back to your processes. So software is only a tool. So it's again the foundation. What is your CDD process? So write down your CDD process from step one to whatever, and your tool, whatever tool you're using, and then look at your tool. Does it do all of this? Does it do all of these things? And if it doesn't, then it might only do part of it, might only meet part of that. It's not up to the software to meet the regulations for you to assess whether the software fits in with your process of your client due diligence.
brilliant. So work out what it is that you're going to do, and then make sure that the AML checks of the software matches what it is that you say you're
Yeah,
doing
is
your
he talking
firm-wide
about
risk
AML
assessment.
checks or is he talking about risk assessments
It says
or
fully meets
they,
all
sorry.
regulatory requirements.
Yeah,
So
it's quite broad. So it
yeah.
depends.
So
Yeah.
AML checks is Pranav put. So for me, make sure you're going. Zama is the one that we use, or AML, CC,
Yeah.
etc. So one of the reputable ones to make sure that
Mm,
you're not buying it for £2.50 when you should be spending £25.50 types of
mm,
that. Brilliant.
mm,
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers that question. This is another one that comes up a lot, Yasmin. Again,
mm.
over a glass of wine when we're talking about the whole world. And it comes from the fact that lots of proposal software, we send out the proposal, and with the proposal is the engagement letter.
Yeah.
And when the client signs the engagement, signs the proposal, then they sign the engagement letter at the same time. So
Okay.
the question is, how should we obtain copies of ID? Should we do it before the client signs the engagement letter, or are we able to do it afterwards?
It should be done when at the start of the business relationship. So even if they sign those two things at the same time, you're going to do it simultaneously, asking them to provide their ID and their proof of address. Here's the proposal. Here's the engagement letter. If you think they're going to sign them both at the same time, then you kind of do it simultaneously.
Right. So whenever we're doing a proposal, whenever we provide effectively within that, providing the meeting, having the initial meeting, we should be doing the ID check or the CDD before we have that issue that proposal letter and therefore the
I mean, I
engagement
can see
letter.
there's a practical issue with that because you can send out a proposal and they don't sign the engagement letter and then they provide, the ID and the proof of address. So it's about you ensuring that they've sought that they are going to be a client because you don't want to conduct an AML check and they don't, they provided the information, you
Yeah,
conduct an AML and they said, no, they don't want to use you because you're out of pocket then, aren't you?
yeah,
So it's about thinking what if it's just done after the engagement letter, you just let them know in the proposal, if you sign the engagement letter, then we require this, this, and this.
yeah.
Work will not start until we receive all of this information.
Yeah, that's how we prepare. That's how we deal
Yeah,
with it within GreenStone. So we send the
yeah,
engagement letter. They sign the engagement letter,
yeah.
and at that point, we still have the right to disengage if
Yes,
the CDD comes back or we don't believe.
yeah,
Blah blah blah. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
we do the proposal and the engagement letter, and then follow it up with the ID check.
Mm.
Um, so Matthew said, so when we do identity on AML, it's not just a case of getting copies of driving license, etc. Do we have to actually use the service to verify that ID? So do we have to do the electronic checks?
You do.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a yes, Matthew. That is, I'm afraid. So we'll get rid of that one. And the reason for that is for the, again, all of a sudden I feel like I'm an expert as I say, but so the politically exposed people and whatnot,
Yeah.
that all comes back as part of the
It checks different lists. So it checks sanctions list and the PEP
whole
and sanction
section.
screen.
Yeah,
Yeah, the sanction screening is part of will be part of your policy as well.
brilliant. Thank you. Um, Claire said, what does a visit look like? Can you describe? Can you describe what happens on a visit? I can certainly tell you what happens from a
There's
Greenstones
different
perspective.
types of visits. So one of them, sometimes supervisory bodies will just send you a letter and say you're having a review, and they require all of this information. So they might require copies of your AML policy, your FWRA. They'll say, I would like client due diligence information on two types of clients. And they don't necessarily just want this year's FWRA and AML policy. They want previous years. They want to see that you've done it, not
Okay.
just this year.
Yeah.
All right.
Not just
So
because
that's
I've got
one.
a visit.
And then you send that across. So that's like a questionnaire, right? And you send that across and you wait for whatever happens. The other one is like a desktop review. So they'll sit with you and then they'll ask you questions and you provide the documents as sort of real time. And then the other one is an on-site visit, which is when they come to your premises and then they just do the whole look at all of your documentation. It is about evidence and documentation, and we're in 2025 now, so you should have at least 5 years worth of documents and policies and procedures and all of that.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I had the telephone version of that. So I had a telephone interview and then
Yeah,
a list of documents that I needed to provide.
yeah,
And then after I provided the documents, I got the feedback on what I
yeah,
needed to do to improve those documents, and then I had
yeah,
to improve those documents and then send them back in, which I think is the way lots of people
yeah.
play the game. So, I've got a question in the system. So, what happens if I get an AML investigation whilst trying to get back to being compliant? Which says very much like, oh, bugger, if I can say that word. I've now got a letter. I
You
need
just
to
have
do
to keep
something.
going with what you're doing
Yeah.
because if you don't have anything in the past or you have very minimal, you can't change that. But you can just keep going with what you're doing. This is what I realized I'm doing this and this is what I'm doing to rectify the issue. That doesn't mean the outcome for the inspector is up to them really. They'll either mark you as non-compliant and then give you actions to take, or they'll fine you, or it's up to them really what they do. But there isn't anything you can do if you get a notice of inspection and you haven't done anything. You just have to keep going.
Yeah, and hearsay wise, the conversation. I have lots of conversations, obviously, with accountants.
Yeah.
I, I, I'm tempting fate now, but my sort of is that they are helping you to become compliant rather
Yeah.
than wagging a finger at you and telling you off and sending you to prison. It's more a
I don't think you'd be
collaborative.
sent to prison.
Yeah, no, but it's more.
It'd have to be pretty serious to be sent to prison,
Yeah,
right?
and it's more a
Um,
collaborative thing. And
it is that, and that is kind of the worry. Going back to the previous question or the earlier question about the FCA taking over. They may not have that collaborative
yeah,
um, attitude or direction. So I would highly recommend everybody try to get their systems
yeah,
as,
and I would too. I'm not suggesting
yeah.
that somebody
No, I
don't do it
know.
because they
Yeah.
can get. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it's like if it's the conversation. I've had some conversations with some accountants that have done, in my opinion, like nothing at all or very little at
Mm,
all. Took a
yeah.
photocopy of a passport and a utility bill, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's my money laundering
Yeah.
done.
I know.
And even when they've had the visit, it's been a process over 6 months or so in order to make sure that all that documentation's in place. But there's
Yeah.
been no sort of real consequence of that, other than they get another visit in 12 months' time in order to make sure that
They're compliant. Yeah.
they've done it.
But again,
So
that would depend on the type of clients, because if they have high risk clients, they probably wouldn't be as generous.
no,
And you're
okay,
gathering that, so it depends on the
right.
type of clients that the accounting firm is dealing with.
Okay, so that's probably then the way that you've said that makes perfect sense. So the people within
Mm.
our community
Mm.
tend not to have peps and
Yeah, they're
that
just
yeah, working with the
local
Russians and all
businesses
that,
or
yeah, and all that
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
stuff. But if you was
genet, yeah,
further up that and had a higher risk, then they'd
yeah.
take a bit more of a okay. That makes perfect sense.
Mm.
And I'm slightly conscious of the time. I've got a question from Polly, and perhaps one ties up the same with Peter. So Polly said, "What's the best digital checker to use?" And would that be that's the Zama one? Would it be or
I mean, I use Amma, but
yeah?
I mean, I'm not an app, I'm not here to sort of promote any particular
No,
software. You do have to kind of do some research on the different software and ensure that it's matching, it's doing sanction screening, it's doing PEP checks. It's easy for the client to upload their documents. Sometimes, like with Zama, for instance, the client uploads all the documents themselves. So it's all of that information that you need to just sort of decide what's the least amount of work that you have to do, but still get the result that you need.
you want. And then the Peter question is, why do lots of people come up as peps who aren't? And can it be prevented?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that means.
No, and I don't have that problem
Was
neither, Peter. So I think that's probably a software thing. rather than a general problem.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's a
yeah.
thing. So yeah,
It could be
I'll
the
have
names. It could be like if you've got like John Smith, you're gonna get a lot of there might be a lot of peps with that name, so that's why it's coming up. But the way you kind of reduce that is making sure you have all the like the date of birth. Obviously, you have to have date of birth, but maybe the middle name.
yeah.
But not quite sure. If I see an example, I could probably assist a bit more.
Yeah. So brilliant. That's it. And then so Matthew said, so can you the service checker name again, please? That was Zama or Zamia, depending on a
XAMA.
XAMA.
AMA.
That's the there you go. Mark's popped
Yeah,
that in the
yeah,
chat box for us as well. So
yeah.
that's how you spell that and whatnot, Matthew. That's the one that we're using, and we use it for the training as well.
Mm.
I like a previous training advisor that was using it felt very high level and didn't really I struggled with that training, whereas the training that Jax does within Zama I find it's very grounded for me,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
very
much
straightforward, isn't
yeah
it? Yeah,
and it's
and
much
it's
more appropriate to the size of practices
yes. Yeah.
that we've got.
Mm.
So that's brilliant. So that's all those questions done. All those questions done. Mark is just going to pop that URL. Brilliant, Mark. I know you do that spot on. So if you want to
Thank you.
have a conversation with Yasmin about where you're at and what you need to do, or any concerns that you've got about your money laundering systems and how you get away with it, then just click that. I'm joking. I'm joking. Click that link, and Yasmin will gladly have a 15-minute conversation with you about how she works and where we go. That just leaves me to say thank you to everybody for coming along, and especially thank you to those people that have asked the questions. As I always say, it's the questions that you ask that makes these webinars, these conversations unique, because we get to deliver the information that you want rather than the information that we think you want. And then finally, I've got your name right all the way through, Yasmin, as well,
You
I
have,
think.
yeah.
Just say
No,
thank you
thank you so much, Simon. It's been a pleasure. Yeah,
for coming
thank you.
along and for sharing. It has been brilliant. We're getting lots of thank yous in the chat as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Yasmin,
Thanks
and
very
see
much.
you all soon. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for watching this recording of the top 5 AML mistakes most accountants and bookkeepers are making with Yasmin Ali. If you like the video and you've got value, please hit the like button. If you've got any questions or comments, then please post them below and we'll gladly answer them. And if you would like to get notified of when we next upload a video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button.